Zoom and reopening it on the host one and see if it, because I did not make any changes.
Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Steve. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Testing. Okay, now we're ready. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin McClooney, and I'll be presenting service today. Tina Jones and Steve Israel are providing technical assistance. Please be aware we are recording the service, and it will be posted on YouTube. However, we'll pause during joys and concerns. Pause recording. At the end of service, after we extinguish the chalice, we will have announcements. We joined together this morning to seek justice, equality, and fairness in the world. Our hearts are touched by the human need we feel around us, whether far away or within reach of our hands. We come here to be together because this is how we believe our lives are best lived. In questioning and conversation, in compassion and in service, in gratitude and in joy, in companionship and in love. It is good to be together with you today. Let's see, maybe one new person. For those of you who are new to us, please note that we are a diverse group with a wide variety of interests and beliefs, and therefore our services are varied in format, tone, and topic. We encourage you to attend and view several services to gain a good understanding of our congregation. If you want to start receiving our weekly email of MVUUC news, please write your contact information on the blue card found in the pocket of the chair. There is a box on the greeting table where you can deposit this card after service. Please take a moment to think of all your friends at MVUUC, greet them here in person or with a comment in the chat box. Let us support one another. Did we pick a chalice lighter today? I do not have it in my script. Megan, do you want to light the chalice? Okay. The chalice will be lit today by Megan Ranciere. Please join me in reading these words by Reverend Lori Gorgas Halban for the lighting of the chalice. We light our chalice flame for those who live their lives in closets of shame, for those who furtively visited the bars where nobody knew your name, for the Stonewall riot and the fierce trans women who fought, for the plague which still takes far too many, too young, too soon. So many gone, so many never lived to see. Out gay kids singing on TV, out gay people serving in the military, marriage equality, families formed by intention. We light our chalice flame for all these, and for all our siblings of the rainbow, surviving, living life out in the open with pride. Now is the time for a sharing of joys, concerns, and milestones. Tina, please pause recording for the service at this time. At MVUUC, we use the elements of stone and water to help us give voice to our deepest feelings and share life's blessings and hardships with one another. Please come up and share your joys and concerns.
Hello. I just wanted to share that Hogwarts went really well. A little biased, but I think it went well. And I just wanted. So our first song for today is hymn number 131, called "Love Will Guide Us," and this is one of the ones we have recorded on our piano. So we're going to have the piano lead us. There will be an intro, and then the first verse will start. You can follow along in your great hymnals. You can also follow the lyrics up on the slide. So here we go.
Okay, our opening words today are from Reverend Zeb Green. It was my first Sunday in the pulpit of the congregation that I serve. I'm not typically a worship leader and felt particularly nervous this Sunday. Not because of preaching, but because it was my first time taking a public role while wearing a skirt and presenting as the more feminine. I was raised as a boy. People look at me and see a strong, healthy young man. I have an invisible disability and am a gender nonconforming person. However, and people get very uncomfortable when what they see doesn't match their expectations. I was also raised with the Southern conservative teaching that church is about conformity, fitting in, and being respectable. Anything that could make people uncomfortable, ask questions, or draw any scrutiny was not allowed in church. Thank the heavens that I haven't attended a church like that in decades. I still come to church with a voice ringing. Don't rock the boat. Be who they want you to be. That voice and conditioning are at odds with everything the faith traditions that I love tell me about myself and my relationship with the divine. The challenge I face is to share the authentic and sacred truth inside of me. That morning, I began service with, "My name is Zeb Green. My pronouns are they, them. I've got my scraggly beard, brand new skirt, and cute scarf, and I am here to share a word or two about love. It's just who I am. At coffee hour, following the service, one of the youth came over to me and said, with so much pride, I am a they, them too, and my brother is a he, him. I would have loved it as a kid to have a church that encouraged us to listen to our heartfelt yearning of self, to express ourselves with authenticity, and had adults who modeled those behaviors for us. That's why I work past the inner voice. That's why I risk uncomfortable situations, strange looks, questionable comments about wearing a kilt, and the microaggressions as people figure it all out. Trans and non-binary people are under attack in this country. The pressure for all of us, especially our youth, to hide our true selves is immense. I'm so glad that we have faith traditions that embrace multiple paths through life. I'm grateful that I risk scrutiny to appear my true self, and deeply touched that in doing so, I was able to affirm the journey of my congregation's youth. Okay, so now we're transitioning to the reflection, and this reflection was written by Tom Edge, and I am just presenting it, but so try to hear Tom's voice. I know most of you in the congregation probably can do that easily. You may be wondering why we're talking about Pride in the month of August, since LGBTQ plus History Month and Pride events usually take place in June. The reason is that this Saturday, August 24th, which is, I don't think that's the right date, but close enough, is the it is? Okay, it has been updated, okay. Is the celebration of Pride in Toledo, which has its own unique history and contribution to the community. Today, we'll be looking at the overall history of Pride, as well as the local history of our regional celebration in Toledo. Before I continue, I would like to share a short video looking at one of the pioneers of the modern movements of the LGBTQ plus equality. Following my short talk, I would love to hear your reactions to the video, but I would also like you to think of two other things and perhaps discuss them after the reflection. First, are there topics related to LGBTQ plus identities that you would like us to explore in more depth in future services? And what do you think we could do as a congregation to help demonstrate our solidarity with these communities? Let us begin with this video, the grandfather of the queer liberation movement.
I think queer Americans today can thank Frank Kameny for recognizing that we're here and we're queer and we deserve our rights. Frank Kameny was a Harvard-trained astronomer with a PhD in astrophysics who was working for the US Defense Department, helping build space systems for what would soon become NASA. But then the Army found out that he was gay. He had been arrested with another man in a public restroom in San Francisco and very quickly lost his job. And what made him different was he was the first of the victims of the Lavender Scare, as we now call it. He was the first to fight back. At the same time that Senator McCarthy was pursuing alleged communist and security risks within the State Department and the federal government, he and his allies were also pursuing sexual deviance at a rate even higher than they were going after alleged communists. So they argued that if you were queer and working for the federal government, not only were you just immoral, but you were also a security risk, because if you were queer, then you were necessarily secretive about your condition, as they would call it. And so that meant that Soviet agents, for example, could then use that secret against you to acquire classified information. He was the first to file suit against the federal government and its discriminatory policies, and he would go on to create Washington's first gay lobbying group, the Mattachine Society of Washington.
After I got going on the whole gay movement thing, which was starting in any formal sense in 1961, when I founded the Madison Society of Washington here and got into other things, and we took on the government. Eventually I became the authority in the country on security clearances for gay people and military cases. And I have mounds and mounds and mounds of files at home, case after case after case. In those days, you got either a dishonorable discharge or an undesirable discharge. And so I used to fight a large number of cases of people being threatened with that kind of discharge.
Frank Kameny turned to the Black Freedom Movement and saw what the NAACP was doing, what folks like Bayard Rustin was doing with his March on Washington in '63, and started adapting them for this new fledgling movement called the homophile movements. The next year, the homophile movement begins marching. Frank Kameny begins marching with his organization outside the White House, outside the Defense Department, outside the State Department. The problem was the homophile movement wasn't making space for those who existed at the intersection of those two movements. So when you look at the photographs of those early marches in 1965 at the White House and other sites of federal power, almost all of the marchers are white because they simply were not doing the work to recruit people who may have already been activists in the Black Freedom Movement and also were queer. And as the 60s wore on, and as individuality became more and more important, and as a new generation of activists began saying, you're excluding people, Frank Kameny wasn't able to adapt. He didn't realize that he was holding back the movement. It took Stonewall to really begin an influx into what was then called the homophile movement and revolutionizing it and expanding it in size and scope to make it so it wasn't just a movement for white men wearing suit and tie, but instead a movement for everyone. It shows us not just the successes of how progress is made, but also the failures and how we can learn from the mistakes of the past. As a matter of principle, because he was so certain that he was a victim of prejudice and he could not afford to let that stand, he really lived a life of poverty. I became interested in Frank Kameny's story when his name popped up as a related figure after I watched the film Milk about Harvey Milk, and I realized this was one of the grandfathers of the movement for queer liberation, and yet there wasn't a book written about him. Kameny died during the Obama administration, and fortunately he did receive the recognition and the thanks, but also the apology from the federal government for what it had done to Frank. When President Obama repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, when he signed the legislation, Frank Kameny was there, and he actually received the pen that President Obama used to sign that piece of legislation. Shows how long progress takes and how much work goes into creating change. We still don't have an Equality Act, which is necessary to ensure that the decision is applied consistently despite future administrations. And so we have to keep fighting, but also learn from the mistakes of people like Frank Kameny and ensuring that we're not leaving people behind in that process.
Every 4th of July, from 1965 to 1969, a small but determined group of activists marched in Philadelphia outside of Independence Hall. Usually, number 3 or 4 dozen people, they thought it appropriate to use Independence Day and the birthplace of the United States to dramatize their cause. Frank Kameny was usually among them. Marching in the sweltering heat in a shirt and tie, he was one of the few activists of the period who was willing to speak to the press and openly identify as gay. One newspaper account from 1967 noted how orderly they were. Nearby police openly said that they didn't mind these protesters since they never caused trouble. Passers-by on the street sometimes stopped and stared, wondering if they read the picket signs correctly. Some turned to friends or family members, pointing and said, "Wait, are they all?" without finding the words to finish that sentence. The participants in these marches mostly remained silent, directing questions to a designated spokesperson to avoid conflicting messages. They handed out leaflets detailing the many forms of legal discrimination that LGBTQ+ people faced at the time. In the late 1960s, every state but Illinois had a law in the books criminalizing gay sex. Some defendants faced up to 5 years in prison if convicted. There were no legal protections of any significant area of life, from employment to housing to education. Police entrapment of violence was rampant. Until 1958, post offices would censor LGBTQ+ materials from the mail. Homosexuality was still listed as a psychiatric disorder until 1973, and newspapers regularly used terms like pervert and deviant when referring to queer people. Amid all of these restrictions, however, queer folks fought and loved and lived their lives. Some lived openly, others in the closet. Some tried to hide or change themselves to fit into society's expectations. Others openly questioned these norms. Some, like those marching in Philadelphia, thought that the best way to change people's minds on their rights was to present themselves as respectable, normal Americans who simply wanted to live their lives without fear of retaliation for their identities. Others fought back, literally, in Los Angeles, in Milwaukee, and San Francisco, or engaged in sit-ins in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. What we now consider the first official Pride celebrations came on the first anniversary of Stonewall, the rebellion against police harassment that started on June 28, 1969 in Greenwich Village. Those marchers were more than the culmination of a tumultuous year after patrons at the Stonewall Inn fought back and resisted arrest. It amplified the calls that had been gathering steam for years from queer activists. Calls for people to come forward and challenge a society that tried to make them invisible. Coming out was not new. UCLA professor Abigail Sagway points out that it was used within gay and lesbian communities in the early 20th century to signal people entering into queer society the way that debutantes did as teenagers. But now coming out was about visibility. It became a step in fighting back against shame. Pride celebrations became opportunities for queer communities to come together in public, celebrate their identities, and connect with other people like them. This brings us to the more recent history of Toledo Pride, which started in 2009. Some of you might remember Caitlin Ballinger, who used to attend MVUUC when she was a college student. She has also been deeply involved in Toledo Pride over the years, and she offered her perspective on the history of this event. She says, "My understanding is that the event was founded 15 years ago by a UU family. Lexi Heyman Staples, her partner Nicole, Tori Thorne, and Lexi's mom and brother, Hani and Nathan Staples. Hani and Lexi owned and operated one of Toledo's only lesbian bars, Outskirts, for several years. The event is still totally volunteer run with a committee of folks comprised of over 50% UUs and has hosted the event each year in downtown Toledo, minus 2 COVID years. So 2024 marks the 13th Toledo Pride. The event continues to grow after fighting to exist and facing challenges and threats each year during planning, has established itself as a safe space with queer performers, including drag, and is a family-friendly 3-day festival incorporating more partners and sponsors every year. Here's a news story from 2022 that helps to bring this history to life.
already the middle of August, and it's time to take another trip through Toledo history. This time, let's rewind and take a look back at Toledo Pride.
The Pride started as a political movement to start the gay civil rights movement, and it's not finished.
The month of June is traditionally Pride Month, honoring a turning point in the fight for LGBTQIA+ rights. But for Toledo Pride, that celebration is held every August. Organizers chose August to give people a chance to travel to other Pride events. What started out small in 2009 blossomed into something much larger. Toledo Pride grew from a one-day festival downtown to a sprawling 3-day event that attracted more than 20,000 people to Promenade Park.
It's just important for us to be a part of the community and make sure that Toledo knows that we're supporting Toledo, and Toledo's been supporting the heck out of us.
And of course, with every Pride comes the big parade. But it's more than just a celebration. It's a reminder of the ongoing fight for equality in the LGBTQIA+ community. In 2014, Toledo Pride was even more of a call to action than usual. A growing number of states were beginning to acknowledge same-sex marriage. Toledoan Sherry Trepepi married her partner in Maine, where same-sex marriage was legal. In Ohio, it wasn't.
People should be able to marry who they love, and that shouldn't be dictated by strangers.
Then, in 2015, a landmark decision. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of marriage equality.
And it was amazing that it passed, and now we can legally get married. It's just like a dream come true for us.
And the Grand Marshal of Toledo's Pride Parade that year was Jim Obergefell of Sandusky. Obergefell was the lead plaintiff in the Supreme Court case that led to the legalization of same-sex marriage in the United States.
The fact that there are now more than 60 Pride celebrations in our state, to me, is such a great indication of the progress we have made as a people, as a society.
Ahead of Toledo Pride in 2021, the community honored a local trailblazer who paved the way for gay and Latino politicians.
For those who know or knew Lewis really well, he really always did want his own way.
A portion of Adams Street was given a rainbow coat of paint and dedicated Louis P. Escobar Way. And for this year?
2022, we fully intend to let our hair down, have a full parade, and have Pride back to normal.
And that's it for this week's Toledo History. Until next week, I'm Diane Woodring.
All right, so now we have a little time, I think, to do a little bit of a discussion. We have 2 key questions that we're going to ask everyone. Steve, if we can turn that microphone on, I'll pass that around. The 2 questions are there topics related to LGBTQ+ identities that you would like us to explore in more depth in future services? And what do you think we could do as a congregation to help demonstrate our solidarity with the LGBTQ+ communities? So I'll pass this around. Does anybody have any thoughts on these 2 items?
I'm someone who was a teenager in the Old West End of Toledo in the 1970s. My neighbor was a hairdresser, female impersonator. We had a gay population and Catholics and Black population in the Old West End. So, but back then we were used to the word gay and lesbian. And I now have a non-binary nibbling. And I'm trying to I'm very liberal, but I have to admit, I told my nibbling that it's a term for niece or nephew, if you want to look it up. That's non-binary. I did tell them, I said, I may make mistakes because you waited till you were 15 to tell me this. So I was used to you being my niece for 15 years. So I may get the pronouns wrong. So I know that is probably a struggle for some of us because, you know, like I said, I grew up very liberal, but, you know, it was very fast moving with a lot of different terminology. So I just wanted to say that's my experience.
Yeah, I know that can be challenging for, you know, this is just my own personal experience, but I think that people are very understanding as long as you're making an effort and you don't make a big deal out of it, you just correct yourself and move on. It seems to be, you know, just fine. So someone else might have a different perspective, but that's been my experience.
It was easier for me to accept they, them, because, hey, tested out of English in college at Iowa State Teachers College, right? I was a math major and a physics minor, but they tested out of the required English. So I was taught grammar, right? And say they, them was plural, right? But it helped when I came across an Oxford English Dictionary article that they was both singular and plural before it was plural. And they gave examples from a long time ago, and that helped me.
Yeah, I'd heard that as well. Historically, they, them was just fine for anyone.
Karen and I were married in Maine because we couldn't get married in Florida because it was illegal everywhere. And I grew up in the 60s, and I've had the experience of you were either in a hospital if you were gay or lesbian, or you were in jail. And so when I went for my practicum at a university psychiatric facility, there was a person in there who was lesbian. That's the only reason she was there. And so I got some pretty hard hits on it at the same time as I was having a relationship outside of that. So it seemed to me always as difficult as it could be until things started to change around. And I think now with transgender, we have a similar edge, even going more toward there are so many ways to love and be, and the acceptance hopefully is growing larger. So I say act, go march, go do whatever you can do, because it will all end up good.
Yes, thank you for that. So one thing we can do is participate in the marches, which our congregation has done for many years, and we're doing this year as well, so please sign up with Megan. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
So I still feel relatively new to the Unitarian Universalist traditions. When Megan started holding a book club in the late fall, that was what got me involved. And as part of that, we were reading about other congregations, and one was from a place near where I used to live, which is Annapolis, Maryland. And I watched some of their services, and I was very, very moved when they had a sort of homecoming service. And it's a pretty large congregation. And they would acknowledge all sorts of transitions that people made, like death, like marriage, like even leaving the congregation, you got honored as having passed through or something. And one of them was a very powerful naming ceremony for a person who was changing their name from what it used to be to the future. And it was totally unexpected for me as a viewer on Zoom of this ceremony, and the power of that ritual, that a person stood up in front of this huge congregation as if they were being christened as a child, was amazing to me, and it really made me want to learn more about UU.
I really like that. That's really good, great idea. So maybe something we can think about. Yeah. I'll just leave with one that I want to see change. This is our bathroom signs. So we'll work on that soon, hopefully. Okay, so let's go back to the rest of the service. Let me put this back.
Cool. So we're gonna sort of and for all other communities that are oppressed. This is a hymn called We'll Build the Land. It's number 121 in the Great Hymnal, but you can
Yeah, that was a long one. All right. Now we pass our offertory basket. All donations are gratefully welcomed. If you make automatic pledge payments, please place one of the laminated cards to indicate the support in the basket. Also, if you'd like your donation to count toward your pledge amount, please put it in an envelope with your name on it. Thanks.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
Thank you. Okay, our closing words today are from comedian and actress Margaret Cho. If public figures came out of the closet, then the LGBT kids who saw them on TV would feel safe before they even knew why they felt dangerous. Maybe if enough people came out of the closet, gay kids would never feel dangerous. Maybe we could have a world where we could all just live. We may not all agree, but why can't we all just live? Please join me in reading the words from Maddie Cefantis for extinguishing our chalice that can be found in your order of service or in Zoom or on there. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. Now is the time for announcements. Does anyone have any announcements?
I'm just letting everyone know, reminder that a week from yesterday is the blood drive, and I'm very excited about it. I have, are you ready? 40 appointments scheduled already. Thank you. But we have room for more, I'm just saying. So if you want to donate, or you know people that want to donate, please sign up. And we have food, and I have volunteers, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who helps me with these drives, especially when we have 2 events going on the same time. Thanks.
So she said 2 events happening at the same time. I'm here to talk about the other event, which is also the event that we've been talking about all service today, which is Toledo Pride, also happening on Saturday, August 24th. I do have a sign-up sheet, and some folks have signed up already. Those of you who have signed up, I will be in touch to, organize and strategize about how we're going to do Saturday. But we could always use more folks involved. So, maybe if you're available, I would love to sign you up. So see me after service. The other announcement is that I did our first harvest from our vegetable garden back there, and there was some corn on the cob. There was one adorable tiny little cantaloupe, and some cherry tomatoes, which there are still more cherry tomatoes out there. I just picked a few for you to sample or look at. So feel free to take home whatever you like and visit the garden if you haven't seen it. Thanks. Yes, but not everybody needs to know that. Okay, board members, we are meeting after service. Thanks.
Are there any announcements on Zoom? Okay. All right, after the closing song, we invite everyone in person to stay for coffee hour. And we're going to do our normal closing song, which is Go With the Song in Your Heart.
Song in your heart, go with music in your soul.
that's it for service. Thanks, everyone.